All right, guys. Good evening. 9:50 p.m. on what is today? Thursday. Man, the week went by fast. Thursday, January 16th, 2025. Again, almost 10 p.m. New York City time. This is Futures Brizio. Hope everybody had a great day. And we'll just do a quick market wrap from today and what could possibly set up for tomorrow. Again, if we don't get any trades, we don't get any trades, but we're following the plan. Okay, so as always, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're just finding it for the first time, drop comments, questions below. Really appreciate it. And let's just jump right in. So, I guess we'll start on futures because I've got this up, and this is copper. I did take two trades in copper today long. I should have held them, but I closed them just before the market closed this afternoon, maybe a couple hours before. But a couple of profitable trades. This copper just continues to rip. Let's jump out to the 4 hour, and you can see that we just continue to rip higher. We've had multiple touches back on the trend line, and so I don't see any reason to stop that. Although if we do look to the right, we do have a potential area coming up here, and then another one here, which would kind of represent some swing highs. So I do anticipate we will see some pressure on this uptrend as we get towards this area, which is another reason why I'm going to back away from this a little bit. I want to see what this does. I'm not saying we're going to see a reversal here, but because copper is definitely in an uptrend, even on the higher time frames. But everybody else sees these areas too. So I do expect some at least short-term weakness as we approach somewhere in between these two red lines. And then we'll have to see. It could, present another great buying opportunity if we get a decent pullback here. But if you're trading copper, just be cautious as we approach these areas, because these are definitely areas where there's been pressure before. You can see looking way back to the left, several times we've run into resistance or support inside of this area here. So there's no reason to think that won't happen again. It doesn't mean it won't eventually break through this area, but do expect some at least corrective price action as we approach this area, and it might be more substantial than what we've seen here. Okay, so like I said, I'll be looking at copper still as bullish, but a little bit cautious over this area until if and when we break out of this zone. Then I think we have potential to go significantly higher, but we'll see how that goes. So if we look at crude oil, so crude oil again out to the 4 hour chart, definitely been trending up. We see we have three touches, probably four touches on this latest trend line. As of right now we're in the overnight session. Crude oil is trying to move higher. I just don't like to trade during this time. You can see the candles are very small. They are moving higher, and it does look like a good setup off this trend line, but I just don't trade during this time. So this is overnight session. It's very low volume, and this is just not a time I want to trade. So if I end up missing some move, that's fine. But either way, crude oil is continuing to move higher, and we're not at contract highs, but it looks like we're trying to get back up there again. So still bullish in crude oil, and I don't see any reason to change that view right now. So we'll see if we can get a pullback tomorrow during the session. During the regular session, then I would definitely take a long on this, but I'm not willing to long this just based on this overnight action. And like I said, if it ends up moving and I don't get the trade, then so be it. All right, so on to natural gas. So natural gas, 4 hour chart, we had this real hockey stick 4 hour candle today. I didn't look, but I would imagine this was probably some kind of news candle, Maybe there was a gas inventory. There must have been some kind of news to make it push like this at this time, because this was at a weird time of the session. So usually that's some sort of news candle. Like I said, I didn't go back and look at that. I probably should, but anytime you see a gigantic candle like this, especially during an odd time of day, that's almost always driven by some kind of news. Whether it was a schedule release, like I said, a natural gas inventory type of release, scheduled release, or whether it was just something, in the news, sentiment wise. So, but either way, gas is bullish. I would like to see, a bit more of a correction here, but either way, pullbacks in natural gas are definitely buying opportunities. And so, again, much like crude oil and copper, I will be looking to establish long positions in natural gas. All right, on to the DAX. DAX did move higher. I didn't trade the DAX today. Honestly, this latest tag onto the trend line here, which happened a couple of days ago, happened during the overnight session. I did take another trade on DAX. I think it was yesterday that I got out, I think at this high right here, but it did continue up. But you can see really for about the last 24 hours or so, it's been essentially moving sideways. So I would like to see a little bit more of a corrective move, and it looks like it probably will do that. We had these kind of hockey stick candles here where we went up, made a new high, then we had a bearish engulfing candle come right back and basically erase that gain, and now we've had choppy price action to the upside. So I wouldn't be at all surprised, especially after this big move, this big move here, that we see a more substantial move back down. Whether it's back to the trend line or not, I'm not sure. So I'm still bullish on DAX, but I do think it has some room to pull back here before I look for longs. I'm not going to trade it from this area, especially after such a big move like this. It is definitely going to be due for a pullback here. So again, I'd love to see it come back to the trend line, but I would either way, I'd have to see a pretty substantial move back just to kind of reset and reload on this uptrend. Okay, so that's on futures. Over to Forex. So we'll start. We got dollar Swiss here. I was long in dollar Swiss. I closed that trade. However, you can see what we're doing right now. We've come back to the trend line again. So this is setting up potentially for another nice long here. I'd like to see it, kind of take out some of this area. We do have, what I like to call a little retail trap area here, which is essentially these equal highs sitting right here. Okay, a lot of times you'll get the big traders will come up and they'll spike above there and try to get breakout traders, and then they'll push it back down again. They'll have their lows down, their stops down here. They'll spike up here, come down, take them out, and then eventually the real move might happen. So this is a 15-minute chart right now. To be honest, I mean, if this is going to go higher, it's got a pretty big move coming, and so I don't necessarily need to rush it. I think a better area to look if you're a breakout trader is above these highs. If you are going to take it here, just be prepared to have this spike and come back down, then maybe tag the trend line, then maybe go. So you may have to have a bigger stop loss here, or just be willing to accept a loss here if this does reverse and go lower. But on the higher time frame, it does look pretty bullish, and we are back to the trend line. And overall, I am still looking for long positions on dollar Swiss. Just a matter of when I decide to get back in. So here's Aussie yen. The yen has been very strong. So all the yen crosses are pretty much down as the yen strengthens. And, Aussie yen's no different. You can see on the 4-hour chart, we have no opportunity. We're nowhere near the trend line. So if you wanted to potentially trade this, you would have to do it on a shorter time frame on one of these kind of minor pullbacks on the larger trend. Like here would have been a good place here, and then maybe there's another one here. Um, because as we get further down here and away from the 4-hour trend line, that's not an area that you're going to want to trade from on this time frame. The other thing I'll just point out on this is we do have this area down in here where prices made multiple tags off of here. Here we broke through a little bit, came back, another one here, another one here. We are approaching that area. So much as what we were looking at, like with copper, approaching a key level. This is, a key area here on this chart. Clearly, this price down in here, this price range down in here is of interest. So again, if you're shorting Aussie yen, just be careful as you come into this area. It might have another good push down, but then I would expect to see some sort of reaction off this area. Again, doesn't mean it'll be a reversal, but probably a more substantial push back up once it runs into these previous areas where clearly buyers stepped in, where you see these big wicks where price tried to go down and then was bought back up. Like I said, it actually broke the level here and chopped around, but then we had these two huge candles, bullish candles, push it back up. So clearly this area around 96 or so is a pretty important area. Between 95.50 and 96 is a pretty big area here. So just be cautious if you're shorting Aussie yen about this particular area on the chart. Okay. So Aussie Swiss has definitely kind of moved into a bit of a range. On the 4-hour chart, we had this downtrend trending trend line here, which has been broken on this area. However, excuse me, we see here that we have this last touch on the trend line on the 4-hour chart underneath. The price has made 2 attempts now to break through here, and it's failed. But we are getting, this kind of wedge pattern setting up here. So I'm just not going to touch this one right now. I either want to see this if we're building up buying pressure here, that's fine. But I want to see it come up and decisively, close above here with some nice, real strong bullish price action to push this higher. And if we're going to go lower again, then I'm going to want to see this low taken out right here at minimum. I think this is probably a pretty good area. You also have this one right here, that you could look at for, break. But again, this is a 4-hour chart. I'm not sure you really have to wait that long, because if this, gradual uptrend we're riding along this 1-hour trend line here is going to hold, it's not going to take this low out, right? It's just going to come down here, hit the trend line and go again. Okay, so this is probably a pretty safe area that if price does get down below here and we can get a nice close below this low, then the downtrend will continue. But again, for the long side, I'm not interested as long as it's kind of chopping in this wedge. I want to see it kind of make a decision and decide if it's going to, start trending again. I just don't like these sideways kind of, wedge type patterns. Some people do. Some people love trading these consolidation areas and these wedge patterns. That's great. It's just not something that I'm psychologically set for, so I just don't do it. So so I'm just kind of watching Aussie yen. Probably won't be any trade on this, certainly not tomorrow, I wouldn't think, unless there's some news. So we'll probably just end up watching this into next week. So, but you never know, so we'll keep an eye on it. Swiss yen is much like Aussie yen, clearly in a downtrend with yen strength. There's no 4-hour opportunity. You can see we're nowhere near the trend line. We've definitely pulled away. So again, the opportunity here, if there is one, would be to trade these minor pullbacks on like the hourly chart, where you could come in here and look for just continuations back to the downside. In terms of levels, I think there is a level down here you can see, but this is still quite a ways. Unlike the Aussie yen, this is still quite a ways away. So, I'm still pretty confident on shorts on the Swiss yen, at least back down into these areas down in here. So, I would love to see a pull back to the trend line, but if we don't get that, then certainly you could look for continuations on the shorter time frame. Okay, so you have to keep in mind that at least with this setup in this 4 hour time frame, the golden trades are going to be when it comes back to the trend line, right? So right here, and obviously this was the kind of the first one, so we don't necessarily want to count this one, but this one right here, where it came back, this is a golden setup, right? Because all you got to do is here is wait for it to hit the 4 hour, then you go to a shorter time frame and you just look for a change in momentum back to the downside. So if we mark this area off, let's drop to like the 15-minute chart. And here it was, I was just approaching, and then boom, we had this bearish price action. As soon as you start seeing these big bearish candles after these tiny little moment and all these wicks, where it tries to break above the trend line, wick, wick, wick. And when there is an actual full candle, it's actually a bearish candle. All these little low volume candles where it just couldn't get any buying action. And then boom, anywhere in here would have been a great place to go short. Okay. But, and it's relatively low risk too, right? Because all you do is you're just going to, wait for this to round and roll over and start going back down, put your stop up here and just let it go. And if you're wrong and it blasts through, then so be it. But it's a pretty safe trade. The only thing is, you're going to wait a long time for those, right? If we look at from this move, when it came off this trend line the first time, all the way down to here is, what is that? 25 4-hour candles. Okay, so that's 25 times 4, that's 100 hours. Okay, so that's what, like 100 hours is like 4 days. Okay, so there's 4 days there, and then from here back up to the trend line is another, let's just call it 10 candles. So another 10 candles, so that's another 40 hours, so that's another almost 2 days right there. Okay, so you're talking about 6 days between here and here for this to set up. Now that's not like huge. I mean, sometimes it's weeks, but it's 6 days. So if you have to be patient and wait for these opportunities. You can go to the shorter time frames like the 1 hour and catch these lower time frame swing points, within that larger trend. These can be low, relatively low risk trades too. It's just that if you take one of these, there is a chance that it starts to come down, and then the corrective move hasn't ended. It turns around, it blasts back up to the trend line, you get stopped out. Okay, so these are the A plus setups when it hits the trend line, but again, you're just not going to get these very often. And if you want to sit and wait for them, that's perfectly fine. Just understand you're not going to get very many trades, and that's fine. You don't need to necessarily. You don't want to have FOMO just because you're sitting around waiting. The one thing I would say about that is, if you are going to sit and wait on, say, these 4-hour time frames, let's say, okay, anything on like a 4-hour or higher, the one thing I think that it does allow you to do is look at more, if you're trading Forex, more pairs. Because when you're talking about a 4-hour chart, you're only going to have to look at it really a couple of times a day, because you're just going to say, is it at the trend line? No. Okay, so I'm not trading. I move on to the next one. And it's only until you see price get up to, or at least very, very close to the trend line, that now it's going to catch your attention, and you're going to start, looking for those, in this case, bearish shifts of momentum back to the downside. Well, those aren't going to come along very often. So you can set up your charts, draw your trend lines on trending markets, ignore the sideways markets, and just wait, and don't get FOMO during all of this, because you understand that eventually there will be a larger correction that will bring this back, and then you can look to re-enter at that point. Okay, so that is an advantage. The disadvantage is you're going to be waiting around potentially for a lot longer for a trade, but the advantage is it's it requires very little amounts of your time to analyze charts, and you can potentially look at more instruments because you're waiting for that one thing to show on your charts, and until you get that, you're not trading. So, and then once you do get into a trade, assuming that it works out, you know you're going to be holding that trade, back down to, in this case, new lows. Okay, and that's what's happening here. So again, where this is sitting right now, there's no 4-hour. Obviously, there's no 4-hour setup. But if you wanted to look at shorter time frames and look for swings and go short off these shorter time frames, you certainly can. But just understand that at some point, one of these swings is going to come up, start to come down. It's going to start to come back down. You'll jump in, and then all of a sudden, you'll get this, where it'll just blast higher. It'll take out your stop, take out all these swings, get back to the trend line, and then if the trend's going to continue, then at some point it'll start to come back down again. Okay, so that's the kind of the what you have to weigh is important. To try to jump into these smaller time frame trades and take smaller pieces, or do you sit back and wait for these longer ones to work out, where you're going to take much fewer trades, but potentially there'll be better trades to take in the end. I'm not saying these 1-hour trades are bad. I mean, if you took this one, that's a great trade, right? If you took this one, it's a good trade, right? If you took this one, it was, I guess, okay. If you took this one, you went down, you went up, you came down again, and then if you failed to close this thinking it was going to go down again, this is one of those instances where it came down a little bit, right? And then it shot right up. And so maybe you took profit down here, maybe on this pullback, you thought, oh, well, it's going to keep going down. It's just going to retrace and come down. And then, no, it just kept going up. And, maybe you closed it for a small profit. Maybe you got stopped out. I don't know. So, but these are kind of the risk when you're taking these shorter term trades, that eventually there will be a bigger pullback, and you have to be prepared for that. So, and we're not exactly sure when that's going to come. Okay. So I did want to kind of point that out. It's again something you have to decide. Okay, so on to Euro CAD. A little bit like Aussie Swiss, where we've broken the 4-hour trend line. We had this last push lower right here, right off the trend line. Again, this looked like a beautiful setup, right? Let's zoom in a little bit. Tag the trend line, bearish, big bearish candle, and then boom, right? Failed to make a new low. This is usually pretty bullish, because now we've taken out this high and we're back above the trend line. Now we're following a shorter time frame uptrend line right here. Okay, but again, you can see what I have marked off here. This is the last major swing when price did make a new low, which is right here. So to me, even though this is above the trend line, I'm not just going to blanket trade it to the upside. I want this to prove to me it's going to actually go higher. And you don't need to have FOMO, because even though, yes, this is a longer time frame, if it's going to go higher and it's going to get through this horizontal line, it's got a long way to go. Okay, it's got a long way to go back to the upside. So don't rush it, in my opinion. I'm going to wait and I'm going to see what happens. Now we're approaching this trend line now. This overhead resistance area from this previous high over here. We're approaching that area now. What do? Are we going to just break through and continue this downtrend? Is this some sort of ABC correction for all you Elliott wave traders, right? A, B, C, and then eventually we'll turn and roll back down. And, maybe we get a spike above this area. We suck in some breakout traders. It wicks out. People jump in early and then it rolls over. Or is this the beginning of an uptrend, right? Where we're going to break through here, then have a little pullback and go higher. I don't know. So again, this is one I'm going to keep a very close eye on. Whether anything happens tomorrow on Friday, I don't know. But this is definitely an area of interest for me. Down to the 1-hour time frame, you can see, we've been riding this uptrend, higher highs, higher lows. To me, this area right here, which was the, you can tell this weird looking bullish candle was the 5 o'clock candle, market turnover. So I'd want to see price get, if I'm going to resume this downtrend, I'm going to want to see it take out this area pretty definitively. and then I would look to resume the downtrend. But again, it would have to break above this line and a little pullback and go before I would think about going long. So those are kind of my two areas of inflection, just above this swing high and below this low right here. Okay, so in the meantime, this little space that's left right here, I'm not interested in trading that at all. I'll wait and let this thing decide what it wants to do. And right now it's kind of in this, no man's land between all these zones, and so I'll just sit back and wait and see what it does. Dollar Canadian, we talked about this last night. This is the same box I had drawn. We're still inside this range, even though it did bounce off the bottom here. I'm not interested in trading this again. If it's going to go lower, I want to see it close back below this this range, probably below this low, to be honest, just to be safe. Probably below this range, not even just below this box, but probably below this low down here, just to make sure we don't just get a little wick tapping through this box. Okay, or we get up here. You have to watch for a false breakout, right? It could come up here, throw a wick or even a closing candle just above here, suck in breakout traders to go long, and then it rolls over. So you got to be really careful coming out of these ranges. There's obviously something going on here. There's either some kind of accumulation or distribution going on. The large traders are, building some kind of trade here. Whether it's going to go long or short, we'll have to wait and see. But just be careful of fake breakouts. Don't be so, you don't have to be the first one to jump in, right? There is this little swing high. Let me zoom in. We have this wick way back here. So I would take this wick as the minimum where we would have to close above this before I would think about going long. These two, are not enough for me, and obviously this is not. So I would have to see a nice candle body close back above this wick, probably on a 4-hour time frame, but at least a 1-hour time frame before I would even consider that this uptrend's continuing. And for the downside, I'd want to see it come and close back below this low, and then probably get some sort of retest and then have it start moving down. Okay, so I'm not doing anything with dollar Canadian right now. Dollar yen, I had a nice short on. I closed that. This is a lot like the LO yen pairs. Out to the 4-hour, I do think we have plenty of room to run to the downside here. Looking left, we have this little area right here. This is probably the next area of potential support for this pair. But that's still pretty far away. This is a 4-hour chart, especially if we get more of a pullback. I would definitely still trade that. And then, we have these layers of support further down here, all the way back down to here. So I do think dollar yen does have some room to the downside based on yen strength. Be interesting to see, because a lot of it's going to depend on the dollar too. The dollar yen can be a little bit different than other yen pairs because the dollar can be so dominant. But if the dollar becomes more neutral to weak, and the yen definitely could take over the direction of this pair. So, but again, you can either look to trade shorts off these shorter time frame swings, or you can wait and eventually we probably will see another push back towards the trend line. You can see it's respected this trend line very well, and then another move down. So those are your options, which again was pretty much what I showed you with Aussie yen and Swiss yen. Okay, so they all look pretty much the same. All right. So so that's where I'm at. So in Forex, probably the ones that I'm looking at closest right now is dollar Swiss, euro Canadian, and Aussie Swiss. Those three are probably the ones I'm watching that are probably the soonest ones where I would potentially look to re-enter. Those three. The rest of them, obviously, I'm looking at, but I need to see more, potential retracement or action before I would think about reestablishing any kind of positions. And again, just very quick back in futures, We'll see what happens with oil. Still bullish, even though it is trying to push higher during the overnight session. This just doesn't interest me during this time of night. Um, Natural gas, I would expect to see a more significant pullback after such a big run up before I would trade this again. But if it's very bullish fundamentals, we may not get a big pullback. We might just get, a little bit more. It may not come back down. Actually, I wouldn't expect it to come back to the trend line at this point because we've got this swing right here. So I would expect that it will come down, but may not make it back to the trend line. But definitely bullish, but I want to see a little bit more of a pullback. Same thing on the DAX. We had a big run up. I'd like to see, and it does appear we probably will get a little bit more of a pullback on DAX, but still bullish overall. And copper, you can see even as we speak, we're approaching this zone right here, but we'll see. We've got this area right here, and then we've got a little gap to fill, and then we've got this area up here. So anywhere inside of this red, these two red lines, is where I'm going to want to see what copper does. So to be honest, until it either reverses off this area and we start heading lower, or it clears this area, which it could do in honestly one good 4-hour candle, one or two good 4-hour candles, we'd clear this area. So you're not going to have to wait a long time. But I would want to see it clear this area either to the upside and keep going higher, or if this ends the uptrend and we come into some kind of supply area and then we break and start going lower, whatever. So copper, I'm probably going to stand aside on until it until it decides what it wants to do here inside of this zone. Okay, because you can see this zone is definitely of interest. Just looking left at price, every time it's come near this area, it's either acted as some sort of support or resistance. There's no reason to think it won't happen again. Again, it doesn't mean it's going to reverse and go lower here, but it will struggle probably for a while, and maybe have a little bit of choppiness until either the bulls or the bears can take hold and decide which direction they want to push it. So, all right. So I'll wrap it there, guys. Hope that was helpful. Questions, comments, leave them below. Make sure you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Hope you have a great night. We'll be back with another video, and maybe we'll get some trades tomorrow. Maybe we won't. It is Friday, so keep that in mind. Typical Friday. Things tend to slow down pretty early, so if you don't get something pretty early in the day, it's probably not going to happen. So, all right, take care, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.